Now, in the past hour, Moscow wrapped up the process of taking over Ukraine's Crimea region after the people in the peninsula voted to join Russia on Sunday. The upper house of Russian parliament has ratified a treaty formally making Crimea part of its territory. It's planned the region will be fully integrated into Russia until the end of this year. Now, in other developments, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been discussing U.S. sanctions imposed on his close aides and businesses. Putin said at least for now, Russia will not retaliate against U.S. officials. And Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev says Ukraine should pay back to Moscow $16 billion. Now, he says the treaty on cheap gas prices in exchange for hosting the Sevastopol Navy base is no longer working. Medvedev also said Kiev should return a loan recently given to ousted President Yanukovych. Let's go to Peter Sharp now, who joins us live from Moscow. Now, Peter, this ceremony in trying to get Crimea as part of Russia, it's basically a rubber stamping ceremony.
I think rubber stamp sums it up absolutely perfectly. The legislation went through, the treaty went through the lower house on Thursday, and a few minutes ago passed in the upper house. There was one vote against it in the lower house, but it was a foregone conclusion. Ever since President Putin signed the treaty after his triumphant speech in the Kremlin on Tuesday, it was done and dusted. It was always going to happen. It's amazing when you think, though, that the people of Crimea woke up on Sunday morning as citizens of Ukraine, and a few hours ago found themselves 5 days later the citizens of the Russian Federation. Things moved very, very fast. That legislation hurtled through, and now we have what Putin wanted, and Crimea has been annexed.
That being the case, though, Peter, what does this actually mean for Ukrainians still in Crimea? Will they have to leave?
No, they won't. I mean, they can apply for Russian passports, or they could cross the border and go back into Ukraine. But there'll be no forcible ejection of Ukrainians from Crimea. Earlier this morning, President Putin met with his Security Council, and they looked at ways of normalizing life in Crimea. This comes after some ugly scenes at army post and also on board Ukrainian vessels that were boarded by pro-Russian supporters. They don't want those images coming out. It doesn't do this treaty any good at all. So those were discussions they were having, and now we'll find that over the next well, the rest of the year really, the implementation will go ahead of economic issues, social issues and legal issues that will end up on January 1st with Crimea fully fledged and member of the Russian Federation.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what actually happens then. Peter, thank you very much for that. That's Peter Sharp reporting for us from Moscow. Now, leaders of the European Union are strengthening ties with Ukraine. An association agreement has been signed with Ukraine's delegation at a summit of European heads of state in Brussels. Now, the refusal of then-President Viktor Yanukovych to sign such a deal last November sparked protests and eventually led to his ouster. Let's go live now to Rory Challands, who joins us from that EU meeting. Now, Rory, we know that the EU has said they will not recognize Crimea as being part of Russia. They've already placed sanctions on certain Russian individuals. What more are they doing to show their displeasure with Moscow's actions?
Well, there were a number of measures that were announced late last night here in Brussels. The most important of those really is that list of 12 new Russians and Ukrainians added to the list of 21 already existing, hit with travel bans and asset freezes. Beyond that, the EU is basically cancelling the Russia-EU summit that was upcoming, and also has put on hold any further bilateral meetings with Russia. And it is said that it is drafting up what the next round of sanctions might be. It's calling that Phase 3 sanctions. It's keeping those close to its chest, not saying what the circumstances might be for wheeling those out, and not actually really saying what those would be. I think that's a conscious decision by the EU to keep its cards close and not show its hand to Russia. It is also calling for effective monitoring missions to be allowed into Ukraine, either through the OSCE or failing that through the EU itself.
Now, Rory, Russia is now demanding that Ukraine pay Moscow back $11 billion on a gas agreement, and that agreement should be scrapped. What support will the EU provide Kiev on this matter?
Well, yes, Russia has said that, and that's not gone down very well with the Ukrainian delegation here. We've just been hearing from Arseniy Yatsenyuk, the interim Prime Minister of Ukraine, who said that Russia should not be allowed to use energy as a new nuclear weapon, and that essentially Russia was punishing Ukraine for its European choices. So what Europe is doing in signing this association agreement is basically streamlining Ukraine's integration with Europe. That basically gives Ukraine trade and economic support in the stance of loans, and also freeing up Ukrainian products to travel into the EU without levies, without taxation, without all the sort of things that were applied before. So basically, the EU at the moment is taking a two-pronged approach. It's trying to punish Russia for what it's done, and it's also trying to support Ukraine for choosing, essentially, to side with the Europeans.
All right, Rory, thanks for that. That's Rory Challands there reporting for us from Brussels.